There's a particular kind of silence that children learn to read like a survival manual. Maybe you know it too. It's the silence that falls after you've asked for help with homework, and your mother's sigh fills the room like smoke. It's the pause before your father's eyes return to his phone when you're telling him about your day. It's the way conversations flow around you at the dinner table, like a river dividing around a rock, acknowledging your presence only as an obstacle to navigate. I wonder if you learned, as so many of us did, to measure yourself in the negative spaces, not in what was said to you, but in what wasn't, not in the hugs you received, but in the stiffness of obligatory embraces, not in I love you, but in the exhausted what now that greeted your every need. Here's what I know to be true, and perhaps you feel it in your bones too. When a child grows up feeling like their very existence is an inconvenience, that child's nervous system rewires itself for survival, creating patterns that save us then, but sabotage us now. This isn't melodrama. This is neuroscience. This is the body keeping score of every time love felt conditional, every time care came with a price tag of guilt, every time you learned to shrink yourself to take up less emotional space. Picture this with me for a moment. Imagine your childhood home had an alarm system, not for burglars, but for emotions. Every time you felt too much, needed too much, asked for too much, the alarm would sound. At first, it was obvious. The sharp words, the rolled eyes, the comparisons to siblings who never caused problems like you do. But over time, you got so good at preventing that alarm from going off that you installed your own internal system. Now, decades later, that same alarm screams danger when someone offers you genuine affection. It whispers too much when you want to share your joy. It shouts burden when you need support. The psychologist Donald Winnicott once wrote about the good enough mother, not perfect, just good enough to help a child feel held in the world. But what happens when even good enough feels galaxies away? What happens when the holding felt more like tolerating? You develop what I call anticipatory rejection. You end relationships before they can end you. You apologize before anyone accuses you. You minimize your needs before anyone can call them excessive. Maybe your parents never said the words, "I hate you." Maybe they didn't need to. Children are brilliant interpreters of the unspoken. We catalog every heavy footstep, every closed door, every meal eaten in silence. We become archaeologists of our parents' disappointments, carefully excavating each sigh to understand what we did wrong this time. The nicknames that cut like glass, the difficult one, the sensitive one, the problem child, the family jokes that weren't jokes at all, just cruelty dressed in laughter. And here's the question that matters now, the one that brought you here. At what cost? At what cost did you survive that particular kind of emotional winter? Because survive you did, perhaps with food on your plate and a roof overhead, perhaps with good grades and achievements that should have earned you belonging. But there's a part of you that learned something else entirely. You learned that love is exhausting for the people who have to give it to you. You learned that your needs are negotiations, not rights. You learned that existing loudly, fully, authentically, is a dangerous thing. You see, when rejection becomes the water we swim in as children, we don't recognize it as water, we think it's the whole ocean. We think this is just how love works. Difficult, conditional, requiring constant proof of worthiness. And our beautiful, adaptive brains do what they do best. They create strategies to survive. Maybe you became the helper, the one who could anticipate everyone's needs before they asked. Maybe you became the achiever, collecting accomplishments like shields against criticism. Maybe you became the ghost, present, but never really there, safe in your invisibility. These aren't character flaws. These are brilliantly crafted survival strategies from a child who was doing their best with an impossible situation. The The hypervigilance that exhausts you now, it kept you safe then. The people-pleasing that drains you today, it earned you moments of peace in chaos. The emotional numbing that leaves you feeling disconnected, it protected you from pain too big for a child's heart to hold. But here's what I want you to understand, really understand. In that place beneath thought where truth lives, the alarm system that saved you then is giving you false readings now. It's like having a smoke detector so sensitive, it goes off when you make toast. Yes, it still works. Yes, it's still trying to protect you. But it needs recalibration, not removal. It needs an update to match the reality that you're no longer that powerless child in a house where love felt dangerous. If today a small criticism feels like complete rejection, if someone being busy feels like abandonment, if needing help feels like proof of your unworthiness, this isn't weakness. This is history. This is a body that learned to brace for impact at the slightest sign of disconnection. This is a heart that learned to interpret neutrality as danger, because indifference was often the preview to pain. Tonight, as you move through your evening, notice the moments when you apologize for existing, the sorry you say when someone else bumps into you, the way you minimize your accomplishments, the automatic it's nothing when you're clearly struggling. Notice, without judgment, how you've learned to make yourself smaller, quieter, less needy. Notice how you scan faces for signs of irritation, how you prepare your defense before anyone attacks, how you offer to help before anyone asks. This noticing isn't to shame you, it's to honor the child you were, the one who had to become a master translator of unspoken rejection, the one who learned to survive on crumbs and call them feasts. That child deserves recognition for their brilliance, their resilience, their ability to make it through. And here, in this moment, we begin the journey not of forgetting, not of forgiving before we're ready, but of understanding. Understanding how the unloved child becomes the adult who struggles to receive love. Understanding how yesterday's survival strategies become today's prison. Understanding that healing isn't about erasing the past, but about updating our responses to the present. You were not too much. You were not too difficult. You were not too sensitive. You were a child in a situation where the adults couldn't hold your fullness, and you adapted the only way you knew how. But now you get to write a different story. Now you get to recalibrate that alarm. Now you get to discover what happens when you stop apologizing for the space you take up in the world. This is where we begin, not with giant leaps, but with the radical act of naming what was true. You deserved to be loved without earning it, without shrinking for it, without apologizing for needing it. And that child you were, the one still living inside you, checking if it's safe to come out, they still deserve that love, starting with yours. Close your eyes with me for a moment and slip into a 17-year-old's skin. Not just any teenager, but Joseph, walking through his father's camp wearing that coat. You know the one. The coat of many colors that might as well have been painted with a target. Every thread whispered what everyone already knew. Father loves me best. Can you imagine the weight of that favoritism? Not just the blessing of it, but the terrible burden. To be loved in a way that makes you hated. To receive affection that costs you brotherhood. The day they threw him into that pit, Joseph learned what I call the arithmetic of abandonment. One father's love minus 11 brothers' tolerance equals one boy at the bottom of a dry well. Listen, can you hear it? Not just the silence after their footsteps fade, but the sound of a heart recalibrating its understanding of safety. Down there in the darkness, with dirt in his fingernails and betrayal in his throat, Joseph's internal alarm system was being rewired. The very people who shared his blood, his history, his father's tent, they looked at him and saw something disposable. What belief system crystallizes in a moment like that? Maybe it whispers. Love makes you a target. Maybe it insists. If your own brothers can sell you for 20 pieces of silver, then trust is a luxury you can't afford. The psychologist Peter Levine talks about how trauma lives in the body, how it teaches us to brace for impact even when the danger has passed. Joseph's body learned that lesson in that pit. Every muscle, every nerve ending, every survival instinct sharpened into a single truth: belonging is dangerous when you're seen as too much. But here's what breaks my heart about Joseph's story, and maybe yours too. He didn't collapse, he adapted. When they sold him to Potiphar's house, what did he do? He became indispensable. This is the trauma response we don't talk about enough. Not fight or flight or freeze, but fawn, becoming so useful, so necessary, so perfectly performing that no one could justify throwing you away again. He organized, he managed, he exceeded every expectation, not because he was naturally a workaholic, but because his survival depended on being irreplaceable. Then came the false accusation, the prison cell, another abandonment by justice itself. And what does Joseph do? The same thing. He interprets dreams, manages prisoners, makes himself essential to the warden. Can you feel the exhaustion in that? The relentless pressure of having to earn your right to exist, again and again. By the time he reaches Pharaoh's palace, he's mastered the art of anticipating needs before they're spoken, solving problems before they're fully formed, making himself the answer to questions nobody's asked yet. We call these strengths leadership, insight, wisdom, and they are. But let me ask you something gentle and necessary. What happens to a heart that only knows how to survive by serving? What happens to a soul that's learned to interpret love through the lens of usefulness? Joseph saved Egypt from famine, yes. But who saved Joseph from the belief that he had to be extraordinary just to be tolerated? The reunion with his brothers years later isn't the Hallmark movie we might expect. Joseph doesn't rush into forgiveness. He tests them. He weeps alone where they can't see. He struggles between the part of him that remembers the pit and the part that longs for family. This isn't weakness. This is the honest, messy process of someone trying to recalibrate that old alarm system. He's asking, can I trust this? Can safety exist with the very people who taught me danger? What Joseph does next teaches us something vital. He doesn't pretend the pit never happened. He doesn't minimize the sale into slavery. Instead, he creates what I call conscious boundaries, choosing connection while acknowledging the harm, offering relationship while protecting his heart. He interrupts the cycle of revenge without erasing the reality of the wound. He says, essentially, what you meant for evil, God used for good, not bypassing the evil, but transforming his relationship to it. This is the mirror Joseph holds up for us. Not a demand that we forgive before we're ready or pretend trauma didn't shape us, but an invitation to see how our brilliant adaptations, our hypervigilance, our people-pleasing, our relentless productivity served us then but might be exhausting us now. Joseph shows us that updating our survival strategies isn't betraying our younger selves, it's honoring them by saying, thank you for keeping us alive. Now let me take it from here. Your story might not involve a literal pit or a coat of many colors, but perhaps you know what it's like to be too much and not enough simultaneously, to perfect the art of being needed because being wanted felt impossible, to scan every room for exits, every conversation for danger, every relationship for the moment it might turn. Joseph whispers across the centuries, I see you. I was you, and there's another way to live. Let me map the invisible architecture that Joseph carried from that pit, the same blueprint you might recognize in your own chest. It starts with experiences that carve themselves into a child's soft psychology, like initials in tree bark, the nickname that wasn't funny, the door that stayed closed when you were crying, The comparison to the sibling who never gives us trouble. The cold silence that taught you crying was too loud, needing was too much, existing was exhausting for everyone else. Here's what happens in a child's magnificent brain when love feels dangerous. It becomes a meaning-making machine. It has to explain why the people who should protect are the ones who wound. And because children are narcissistic in the most innocent way, believing they're the center of every story, the brain concludes, I must be the problem. If I could just be different, better, less myself, maybe then I'd be safe. Watch how these experiences crystallize into beliefs, like water becoming ice. I am defective, not you did something wrong, but you are something wrong. I'm too much and not enough simultaneously. If they really knew me, they'd leave. Love is something I have to earn, like wages, like a performance review. These aren't just thoughts, they become the operating system of your entire life, running silently in the background of every interaction. And from these beliefs spring strategies, as predictable as plants growing toward light. Some of us become the perpetual helpers. Joseph organizing Potiphar's entire household, solving problems before anyone notices them. We become indispensable because disposable is what we fear most. Others swing the opposite way, building walls so thick that rejection can't reach us, leaving before we can be left, attacking first because defense feels safer than vulnerability. Both strategies are asking the same question: how do I survive in a world where love is dangerous? But here's what John Bowlby discovered when he studied attachment. What neuroscientists at Harvard now confirm with brain scans. When a child receives consistent, warm care, they develop what he called an internal working model of the world as safe. Their nervous system learns to rest. But when care is inconsistent, cold, or conditional, the nervous system never leaves the watchtower. It develops what researchers call hypervigilance, that exhausting state where you're always scanning for danger, even at dinner with friends, even in bed with someone who loves you. Your body keeps this score in 1,000 small ways. The shoulders that won't soften, carrying tension like armor. The stomach that clenches at every text notification. The sleep that stays shallow. One part of you always listening for footsteps, for anger, for the other shoe to drop. You choose partners who feel familiar, which means cold, or unavailable, or critical, because your nervous system recognizes them. Ah, it says, I know this dance. I know how to survive this. The National Institute of Mental Health found that childhood emotional neglect increases the risk of anxiety and depression by nearly 40%. But, and please hear this, that's not a life sentence. It's information. It's your body saying, this is where I need extra gentleness. This is where I need intentional rewiring. Just as Joseph had to learn that not every house was Potiphar's, not every accusation was false, not every brother would throw him in a pit. You get to learn that not every criticism is rejection, not every boundary is abandonment, not every conflict is catastrophe. Think of it this way. If trauma is the pit, then healing isn't pretending the pit never existed. It's building a ladder, rung by rung, breath by breath, one corrective experience at a time. Your hypervigilance isn't your enemy. It's a guard who's been on duty too long and needs to hear that the war is over. Your people-pleasing isn't weakness. It's a strategy that needs updating, like software designed for an old operating system trying to run in a new world. The alarm system Joseph developed in that pit. It saved Egypt from starvation. Your sensitivities, your ability to read a room, your deep awareness of others' emotions, these aren't just wounds, they're also gifts. The work isn't to eliminate them, but to recalibrate them, to teach them the difference between then and now, between danger and discomfort, between the past that happened and the present that's happening. Here's the beautiful, terrible truth about surviving rejection. You didn't emerge empty-handed. You emerged with superpowers. Joseph didn't just survive that pit. He developed the ability to read a room like a prophet, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to manage resources with the precision of someone who knows what it means to have nothing. You didn't just survive your childhood. You developed antennae so sensitive you can feel someone's mood shift from across the room, a work ethic that makes others look lazy, a capacity for responsibility that would break most people's backs. But here's the paradox that keeps us trapped. The very gifts that saved us then are suffocating us now. It's like developing night vision in a dark cave, then being unable to turn it off in broad daylight. Everything is too bright, too much, too overwhelming. The hypervigilance that helped you dodge your father's moods now has you reading rejection in every delayed text message. The people-pleasing that earned you scraps of affection now has you giving yourself away for free, hoping someone will notice you're empty. Think about Joseph in Pharaoh's palace. By every external measure, he'd made it. Second in command of Egypt, wearing fine linen instead of a bloodied coat. But can you imagine the exhaustion? Every day, proving himself indispensable. Every decision calculated through the lens of survival. Never just being, always performing. The competence that saved him had become a prison with golden bars. He could predict 7 years of famine, but couldn't predict whether he was loved for who he was or what he could provide. This is imposter syndrome's deepest root. Not that we aren't capable, but that our capability is all we are. You excel at work, but live with the constant fear that if you stop producing, you'll be exposed as the unwanted child you once were. You pour yourself out in relationships like water from a broken pitcher, believing that if you just give enough, love enough, sacrifice enough, no one will notice you're actually terrified of being seen. In faith, in friendships, in family, you're performing your worthiness rather than inhabiting it. The psychologist Alice Miller wrote about what she called the drama of the gifted child. How sensitive children become gifted at reading others' needs, but strangers to their own. Your gifts are real. Your intuition, your competence, your ability to hold space for others' pain. These aren't false. They're just incomplete. They're a house built entirely of windows with no walls, no privacy, no place to rest. The path forward isn't to demolish your strengths. God knows, the world needs sensitive souls who understand suffering, leaders who can anticipate problems, hearts that know how to hold complexity. Joseph's trauma-honed abilities literally saved nations from starvation. Your sensitivities might be the very thing that makes you exceptional at what you do. The path forward is to add something you never had: boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges with gates. They say, this gift I have, I choose when and how to share it. This sensitivity, it serves my life, not my survival. This competence, it's an expression of who I am, not a payment for being allowed to exist. Joseph learned this when he finally revealed himself to his brothers, not immediately, not without testing, not without protecting his heart first. He chose the terms of engagement. Your hypervigilance can become discernment when you teach it that not every situation is an emergency. Your people-pleasing can become genuine generosity when it comes from abundance rather than fear. Your exceptional work ethic can become joyful creation when it's not auditioning for love. The antenna doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs a volume dial. The gift doesn't need to be rejected. It needs to be chosen rather than compelled. Here's what I want you to hear in the marrow of your bones. Your sensitivity isn't your weakness. It's your strength that needs rest. Your competence isn't your mask. It's your gift that needs boundaries. Your ability to anticipate others' needs isn't codependence. It's attunement that needs to include yourself in its circle of care. You're not too much. You're just giving too much of yourself away, trying to purchase something that was always supposed to be free, the right to exist, to be loved, to take up space without apology. Let me show you how rejection lives in your Tuesday afternoon. You send a text, watch those 3 dots appear and disappear, and when no reply comes, your chest tightens like someone's turning a screw. Within minutes, you're not just wondering why they haven't responded, you're conducting a full autopsy of the relationship. What did I say wrong? Becomes I always ruin things, becomes I'm too much, becomes the old familiar ache that started long before this text. In a childhood where silence meant danger, your friend cancels dinner plans, and instead of thinking they must be exhausted, your nervous system hears what it's always heard: you're exhausting. At work, your boss says, "Let's talk about this project," and your stomach drops like you're 17 again. Being called to explain yourself, to justify your existence. Joseph must have felt this same anticipatory dread every time someone in authority wanted to discuss something, his body remembering the pit, the false accusation, the years when power meant danger. Notice how your family calls you, not to ask about your dreams, your fears, whether you slept well or ate today, but when something's broken, when there's drama to resolve, a crisis to manage, a fire to extinguish. You've become the family's 911 service, always on call, and they've forgotten you're a person who might need rescuing too. You answer every time, don't you? Because being needed feels safer than being wanted. At least need is predictable. At least crisis gives you a role to play. Your body is trying to tell you the truth. Your mind keeps editing. Those shoulders that won't soften, carrying tension like it's keeping you alive. They remember every time you had to brace for impact. Your shallow breathing during conversations, like you're rationing oxygen, waiting for the moment things go wrong. The way your appetite disappears when you're stressed, or how you eat without tasting, trying to fill a hole that food can't reach. That knot in your solar plexus that tightens when voices rise even slightly. Your body preparing to disappear before anyone can dismiss you. You walk into rooms scanning for who might reject you before noticing who already accepts you. Like Joseph must have entered every Egyptian room, calculating threats before seeing opportunities. You apologize preemptively. Sorry to bother you. Sorry if this is stupid. Sorry for existing, trying to make yourself smaller before anyone can cut you down to size. And when something good happens, when someone genuinely enjoys your company, when peace finally arrives, you feel suspicious. Your nervous system whispers, this is the calm before abandonment, so you sabotage it. Because at least if you destroy it yourself, you know when the ending comes. This isn't drama. This isn't you being too sensitive. This is a nervous system that was trained by experts in rejection, programmed to see danger in neutral faces, abandonment in busy schedules, criticism in silence. Your body learned these lessons before you had words for them, and it remembers even when your mind tries to forget. Let me ask you 3 questions, gently, like checking for bruises you've learned to ignore. Where did you say I'm fine while your body screamed otherwise? That headache that arrives every Sunday night. That jaw pain from clenching your teeth. That exhaustion no amount of sleep can cure. In which relationship do you mistake your own silence for peace, calling it harmony when really it's just you disappearing in plain sight? What request have you been rehearsing for months but never speaking? Afraid that needing something will confirm what you've always suspected, that you're too much trouble to love. If any of these questions land in your chest like a stone in still water, creating ripples you can't ignore, that's not weakness, that's recognition. That's your body saying, finally, someone's listening. That's the beginning of teaching your nervous system a new language, one where texts without replies aren't rejections, where needing help isn't proof of unworthiness, where peace doesn't have to be suspicious. Your body has been faithful to you, keeping score when no one else was counting, remembering when everyone else forgot. Now it's time to be faithful to your body, to honor its wisdom while updating its programming, to thank it for the protection while teaching it that not every silence is the one from childhood. Not every closed door is locked against you. Now we move from understanding to becoming, not in giant leaps. Joseph didn't go from pit to palace in a day, but in steps so small they feel almost insignificant. That's the secret. Healing happens in moments so ordinary you might miss them. Let me give you a map, not for a journey of 1,000 miles, but for the next 24 hours. First step, name without becoming. Tonight, find a quiet moment and say out loud, I was treated as an unwanted child. Not whispering it, not thinking it, speaking it into existence. Notice the urge to soften it. It wasn't that bad, or to let it define you, so I'm unlovable. Resist both. This is just information, like saying, I broke my arm when I was 7. It happened. It affected you. It doesn't determine your worth. When shame rises, when that old voice says, you're being dramatic, repeat this anchor phrase. What I lived through explains me. It doesn't define me. Joseph could have said, I was sold by my brothers. Fact, not identity. Second step, become your own witness. Close your eyes and picture yourself at 7 or 10, or whenever the rejection cut deepest. See that child clearly, their shoulders, their eyes, the way they tried to make themselves smaller. Now, let your adult self sit beside them. You don't need to fix anything. Just whisper, I see you. I believe you. I'm here now. This isn't just visualization. Neuroscience shows that creating this internal presence actually reorganizes traumatic memories. You're literally rewiring your brain. Keep this second anchor close. I don't have to treat myself the way they treated me. Third step, draw one small boundary. Choose something manageable. Maybe it's waiting an hour before responding to someone who only texts when they need something. Maybe it's saying no to one request this week, not all of them, just one. Maybe it's not explaining yourself a third time after you've already been clear. Each boundary is a message to your nervous system. There's an adult in charge now. Here are the exact words. Because I know you need scripts when your throat closes. I love you, but I can't fix this for you. I can't today, I need to rest. Let's talk, but not in this tone. Can we try differently? I won't accept being spoken to like that. If it continues, I'll need to end this conversation. I can handle this part. I can't guarantee the rest. Thanks for inviting me. I'll pass this time. I care about us, and this pattern exhausts me. Can we adjust? Fourth step, find one repairing relationship. You don't need a whole new family. You need one person, one group, one space where you can practice being seen without performing. Maybe it's a support group, a therapist, a friend who texts you memes without needing anything back. Joseph found this in his Egyptian mentor, in the prison warden who trusted him, small relationships that whispered a new story. Each authentic connection teaches your nervous system. Maybe I'm not impossible to love. Fifth step, listen to your body like a friend. When your chest tightens, instead of pushing through, pause and ask, what is this protecting me from? Then give your body what it needs. 3 breaths longer than comfortable. A glass of water drunk slowly. 5 minutes in sunlight. Roll your shoulders until something releases. This isn't self-care fluff. It's teaching your body that someone's finally listening. Your final anchor. My body isn't my enemy. It's my alarm system. I can adjust it, not destroy it. These aren't just suggestions. They're survival tools disguised as daily choices. Joseph used similar tools. He tested his brothers with small challenges before revealing himself. He wept in private before engaging in public. He created boundaries even in forgiveness. He didn't transform overnight. He transformed one choice at a time, one boundary at a time, one tear at a time. Tonight, choose just one micro step. Write your anchor phrase on a sticky note. Say no to one thing. Text someone safe. Take 3 deep breaths before responding to a trigger. Tomorrow, notice what shifts. Not expecting miracles, just watching for the tiny way your shoulders might drop a millimeter, the way your breath might deepen slightly, the way saying no might feel less like dying. Let's return to Joseph one last time, but not to the version Sunday school taught you, to the real one, the man who stood before his brothers 22 years after the pit and didn't know whether to embrace them or banish them. You see, Joseph didn't have a choice about being thrown into that hole, about being sold for the price of sandals, about losing his father's protection. But when power finally rested in his hands, when he could have crushed those who crushed him, he had to choose what to do with everything rejection had taught him. Watch him closely in those reunion scenes. He doesn't rush into forgiveness like some spiritual superhero. He weeps, alone, in private, when no one can weaponize his tears. He tests his brothers with elaborate schemes, hiding his identity, watching to see if they've changed or if they'd throw Benjamin into a pit too. He takes his time, years, actually, because Joseph understood what we need to learn. Healing doesn't happen on anyone else's timeline but yours. Those competencies born from trauma, his ability to read a room like a prophet, to manage resources like someone who knows starvation intimately, to anticipate problems before they bloom, he used them to save nations. But notice, he also used them to protect himself. The same skills that served others also served his own heart. He didn't apologize for needing time. He didn't rush to make his brothers comfortable. He created what I call sacred boundaries, spaces where he could feel the full weight of his ambivalence without having to resolve it immediately. You didn't choose what happened to you either. You didn't volunteer for the rejection, the coldness, the sense that your very existence was an inconvenience. But here's what Joseph's story whispers across the centuries. You get to choose what happens next. Not in some grand, theatrical moment of transformation, but in the daily, ordinary decisions about how you treat yourself when no one's watching. Your hypervigilance, that exhausting ability to sense everyone's mood before they know it themselves. What if you turned that radar toward your own needs occasionally? Your capacity to work harder than anyone else, to prove your worth through exhaustion. What if you used that same dedication to protect your own rest? Your sensitivity that picks up on every micro-rejection. What if it could also attune to the people who genuinely celebrate your existence? Joseph took his gifts and made them multidirectional. He served Egypt, yes, but he also served his own healing. He saved others from starvation while also feeding the hungry child within himself who never got enough attention, enough unconditional love, enough safety. You can do this too. You can take your trauma-honed superpowers and aim them inward occasionally, without guilt, without apology. When ambivalence comes, and it will, that messy cocktail of rage and longing, the simultaneous desire to connect and to protect yourself. Remember Joseph crying in the next room, needing space for his contradictions. You don't have to feel one clean feeling. You can want closeness and fear it. You can love someone and need boundaries with them. You can forgive and still remember. You can heal and still have scars. This is what Joseph teaches us about boundaries. They're not walls or bridges, but something more nuanced. They're doors, sometimes open, sometimes closed, sometimes cracked just enough to let light in while maintaining safety. Your boundaries don't have to be permanent or perfect. They can be adjusted based on what your heart can hold today, this hour, this moment. They can be firm with some people and softer with others. They can change as you change. Joseph's story doesn't end with him forgetting the pit. It ends with him integrating it, making meaning from it, without being imprisoned by it. He says to his brothers, "You intended harm, but God used it for good." Not bypassing the harm, naming it. Not pretending it didn't shape him, acknowledging its impact, but also not letting it have the final word about who he could become. Your story doesn't have to end with forgetting either. The child who was treated as unwanted remains part of you, deserving of the fierce protection you never received. But that child doesn't have to run your life anymore. You can hold them gently while the adult you've become makes decisions from wisdom, not just from wound. Chapter 8. The alarm that saved you can now rest. We've traveled together through Joseph's pit and palace, through your memories and your body's wisdom, and now we arrive where all true journeys end at a beginning. Your alarm system, that exquisite sensitivity that goes off at the slightest hint of rejection, wasn't a mistake. It was brilliance. It kept you alive in a household where love felt dangerous, where existing felt like an imposition. That alarm saved you, but now it's exhausted, ringing at shadows, mistaking steam for smoke. Here's what breaks my heart and gives me hope simultaneously. The rejected child so often becomes the adult who continues the rejection, who picks up where the parents left off, who whispers the same cruel words, but now in their own voice. You learned to treat yourself exactly as you were treated, with impatience, with criticism, with the exhausted sigh of someone dealing with too much. The internalized voice of rejection became so familiar you mistook it for truth. But listen, do you hear it? Beneath that harsh inner critic, there's another voice. Quieter, maybe rusty from disuse, but persistent. It's the voice that brought you here, searching for something different. It's the part of you that knows, despite everything, that you deserved better then and you deserve better now. This is the voice we're learning to amplify. Let me tell you what I believe Joseph would say if he could sit with you tonight. Not as the vizier of Egypt, but as someone who knows what it's like to be discarded by the people who should have protected you. I don't think he'd offer platitudes about forgiveness or moving on. I think he'd look you in the eyes and say, don't let their inability to love you properly become your inability to love yourself. Don't let their rejection become your religion. The truth that's taken me years to learn and that I hope lands in your bones tonight. You might have been treated like leftovers, but that doesn't make you disposable. You might have learned to equate love with exhaustion, care with conditions, acceptance with achievement, but you can teach yourself a new equation. Love can equal rest. Care can equal consistency. Acceptance can equal as you are. Right now, you may never hear the apology you deserve. Your parents may never wake up to the damage done. The siblings who made you the family scapegoat might still be telling the same stories at holiday dinners. And still, you can stop being your own enemy. You can stop finishing the rejection they started. You can become the parent to yourself that you needed then, patient, curious about your feelings rather than annoyed by them, delighted by your existence rather than depleted by it. When a child is treated as unwanted, their brain and heart organize themselves to survive rejection, and those same survival strategies later sabotage adult life. We've seen this truth reflected in Joseph's hypervigilance, in your body's constant alarm, in the exhausting performance of earning your right to exist. But we've also discovered the companion truth. There is a path forward, not around the wound, but through it, with compassion as your compass and boundaries as your map. The rejected child doesn't disappear. That part of you remains, probably somewhere around 7 years old, still wondering what they did wrong. But here's the miracle of healing. That child can finally be held by an adult who chooses their side. You get to be that adult. You get to be the one who says, nothing was wrong with you. You were a child in an impossible situation, and you survived brilliantly. So tonight, before you sleep, I'm asking you to take one small, revolutionary action. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but in the next few hours. Write your anchor phrase, "What I lived through explains me." It doesn't define me, on paper, and read it aloud to yourself. Send a text to someone who feels safe, even if it's just thinking of you. Say no to one small thing without explaining why. When the next trigger comes, take 3 breaths before responding, and notice how even that tiny pause changes things. Put your hand on your chest and say, I'm here now. We're safe. These aren't just exercises. They're acts of rebellion against everything you were taught about your worth. They're tiny declarations of independence from the rejection that raised you. If this conversation has stirred up pain too heavy to carry alone, please reach out for professional support. There's no shame in needing help to recalibrate an alarm system that's been ringing for decades. You've been strong alone for so long, maybe it's time to experience how it feels to be supported. What you lived through explains so much, your sensitivities, your fears, your patterns, but it doesn't define the edges of what's possible for you. Joseph went from pit to palace, but more importantly, from fragmented to whole. You can too. Not by forgetting what happened, but by refusing to let it write your ending. The alarm can rest now. You're awake, you're watching, and you're finally safe enough to heal.